Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Blogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and I'm very pleased to welcome my next guest, Andrew Grant Super, the owner of Berkeley Rand. How are you?
Doing very well this morning. Good January so far. Pleased to be talking to you.
It's a pleasure to have you. I was actually wanting to talk about NFTs. Now, in maybe a sentence or less, could you let the audience know what an NFT is, or a non-fungible token?
They were created as a mechanism to indelibly stamp on a particular transaction that most likely involved an asset, whatever an asset would be deemed, on a particular server, if you want to call it that, called blockchain, of which there are now many blockchains throughout the world. And the idea being is that with that transaction taking place of the purchase of an asset, the non-fungible token would be its stamp, almost its digital stamp, along with its smart contract, which may have covenants and legal side of things, to in perpetuity link that asset with digital information that could never be changed again, indelibly stamped on this blockchain. So it's a ledger, the blockchain, and an NFT is a mechanism of tokenization of several that does that basically puts it on the ledger. And that's actually what an NFT is.
Yachting took a look at that and thought, we're going to jump on this. There was different companies within the industry that were jumping on the NFTs, and then nothing. Tell us a little bit about sort of the entry and the rise and fall of NFTs in yachting.
This time last year, there were a lot of discussions going around between different parties inside and outside of yachting, because family offices and owner reps, as in super yacht owner reps, had owners, or they themselves would have crypto wallets with crypto investments in at the time. And they'd heard about NFTs, and some were even investing in them, and some had got lucky with making money overnight from assets that were very questionable, but very cool to own. So there was a social value to it as such. And there was huge overhype in the world with NFTs because of certain people making obscene money, running into potentially billions. And billionaires are not created every day. So all of a sudden there was a new mechanism of crypto owners in Bitcoin and ETH and what have you, and stable coins. And all of a sudden everybody always wants to be a millionaire or a billionaire. So everybody was jumping on the bandwagon and trying to find cryptocurrencies to trade with them. So that was the big news last year. Companies like FTX were helping that along handsomely, until we found out otherwise. And then NFTs already started to come into effect over the past 2 to 3 years, and really in 2021 and 22, with the excitement, the fact that you were able to trade an asset that you had via the NFT was linked to that asset. And it brought in artists who didn't have a home before. It brought in asset owners, many digital asset owners who didn't have a place to trade. And the rest was really about marketing and hype to really get it up there, that people would believe there's insane value just by the virtue that it's an NFT, regardless of what it was. And so what happened is that wealth, NFTs, crypto wallets starts to bleed from owners of yachts who are billionaires in their own right with their businesses and ownership, and they too could own NFTs as potential investment, and that's still the case, started to bleed down into the industry. And people in the industry, not many, a handful, started to look at it and say, how can we benefit from this new era, which in fact is part of what's called Web 3, Web 3.0. Web 2.0 was all about social media and e-commerce. Web 1.0 was about the birth of search engines like Google in the very beginning, and it was a reference capability. Now with Web 3, we're smart with technology. We've got virtual worlds like metaverses. We've got blockchains, which major corporates are looking at now because they're decentralized and potentially democratized. So they are very interesting, and they have a brilliant future ahead of them. So with NFTs and super yacht industry, what had happened there was several parties had jumped on the bandwagon where they deemed it that this could be a way that people could buy yachts with NFTs, or via NFT mechanisms, I should say, because maybe they've got spare crypto money. that it's very hard to get rid of. You've got tens of millions of cryptocurrency. You just won't get rid of the damn thing. And you can't even necessarily trade it now either. So yeah, I can understand the reasoning behind that with certain companies going, hey, and everyone's taking phone calls of people potentially wanting to partially buy crypto. So it wasn't unfounded. But the difference is they all looked at the hype and went, we can be part of that hype. We'll create a movement and we'll use our brand to do that. And people will want to join. The kind of people that they attracted were just kids, fandoms, who couldn't even afford a boat in a bath, let alone a small dinghy. Those are the kind of champions. And so they also followed the Bored Ape route of going, you can buy a yacht. And they took these wonderful yacht designers that are magnificent. No one disputes that. And yeah, found a new life. And it was certainly a marketing play, which is not a bad thing. And it put some brands on the map. Don't wish to mention them, but know who they are. And it put some new offshoots on the map. So there's nothing wrong with that. It was good marketing. But with the greatest respect, what was it really when you lift up the lid? JPEG picture of a virtual yacht sells for $200, $600. And actually, I know kids of 15 who did crazy yachts, like stupid yachts, with apes hanging on the end of them, selling for 10 times more money. So in the end, and everybody was self-congratulatory. And by the way, whenever you sell these prints, of which prints did sell, depends how successful you want to deem that, and depends what your objectives were. Do billionaires and millionaires want a new club? No, it's not what they want. It's not where they're at. They don't want to belong to clubs anymore. Clubs died with loyalty cards 20 years ago. It's not where people are at these days. They want to hang with cool people, but they don't want to be in a club. So it was misunderstood. But some would argue and say out of that may be that they started to look at blockchain, because blockchain has become very important in terms of supply chain management, of which that's very large in shipbuilding and other areas, and perhaps yacht management, because blockchain allows partnerships and suppliers to feel more comfortable sharing the data of their transactions and so on. So it has a life, but it started off, for me, really without value, and frankly died pretty quickly.
So do you see it reviving at all anytime in the future? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, there's two schools of thoughts about entering into the market the way that some of these companies did. One of them is, and the same as many brands and luxury brands have done, is there's no crime in tipping your toe into the water and trying to understand where you stand with it. You can't necessarily do some long-term strategy when you're in a very nascent market with anything. So there was no crime in doing that. A lot of it was Emperor's New Clothes, though, the way it came across in the marketing. You're like, where's the value? Where's the value? There is no value. Come on. And certainly many of the hundreds of people that I speak to in the NFT and Web3 industry would look at this and go, I don't get it. There's no value in this. There just is. And I don't believe billionaires saw value in it either. But to answer your question in terms of the longer term, blockchain can become essential in a highly politicized industry where people are very protective. Blockchain can be an answer to a single server owned by a single party having too much information, data, intel on everyone else makes everybody feel uncomfortable, that there's never been a platform for data partnerships. And by data, don't just mean data. I mean, data is a byproduct of transactions, of supply, of demand, and whatever else it might be. And blockchain has the answers for that, with or without cryptocurrencies. And right now, that is happening in fashion, in apparel, in other areas of retail, in automotive with regard to supply chain. And yachting has a very complex supply chain structure, and blockchain has some incredible architecture and structure that it will be inevitable and foolish not to look at it and then adopt it, from everything from shipbuilders to designers through to the yacht management side of things. That's very important. Cryptocurrencies will, and it depends on how you look at it. There's an argument in school of thought that says Bitcoin will become absolutely worthless. Right now, Bitcoin's at somewhere between $14,000 to $17,000. And yes, it got all the way up to the highs of 70,000 at one point for a short brief time. But people like me bought it at $800. So I'm laughing. And it's not about making money in terms of that. In other words, it depends on your perspective. In stocks and shares, most of the most successful people in stocks and shares that haven't bought at the top and didn't buy at the bottom. They just know when to buy and when to sell and when to trade. And crypto is no different. It's what I call like a wild African currency, is a way of understanding it. Be prepared for the highs and lows, but it's here to stay. And new ones will form. So it becomes a transactional way of doing things between fiat currencies. So you can buy a yacht with crypto partially. It can be done. And I think if you push the brokers to do that, I'd like to see any broker with their own balls turn around and go, I don't want to take your crypto money. But in other industries, they work very hard with financial advisors and mechanisms to ensure that they are not exposed to the volatility of crypto in certain ways and hedging in certain aspects. So there are ways around it. It's just that none of them seem to have explored or invested in any of that area, but it can be done. I do believe in DAOs and fractional ownerships. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. So in other words, there is no reason to believe most yachting industry go, oh, fractional ownership is dead and buried. We tried it. It all failed. Well, DAOs work differently. And I belong to DAOs where there are like 100 multimillionaires on it, put in serious money. These DAOs are big enough to be venture capital companies in their own right. They could afford to buy a yacht. Of course, how do you make it work and priorities, et cetera, et cetera. But is there money for trading? So that's always been open. And finally, with NFTs, well, there's going to be new forms. Now we're dealing with a thing called SBTs, soul-bound tokens. What that means is it's indelibly linked to you like a passport. Maybe it's your health information. Maybe it's your passport. Maybe it's your financial information. Maybe it's your lifestyle choices. But you don't sell it on and no one wants to buy it because it's indelibly linked to you and it's registered on a blockchain as soul-bound tokenization and transactions. So it's kind of like a passport for yachting, which can be very interesting in terms of that. So yeah, I think there's a future for it, but I'm in stages of talking with various parties as I explain to them, you need to start differently and looking at it differently as to how it can help you with your brand, both operationally and from a marketing perspective. And those conversations are going well with the people that want to listen.
One of the things that I've seen is that yachting, when it comes to the world today in 2023, with technology, even something as basic as cybersecurity, it's almost like it's 15 years behind. Do you think perhaps that what needs to happen is yachting needs to catch up rather quickly in order to move forward and take advantage of these new opportunities that are coming up in the future?
If they don't, they'll pay a very heavy price for it over years to come. And maybe some might look at it and say, well, I'll be retired by it. I've made all my money, so I don't care. That's cool. It's not going to come today where their job's threatened or their company's threatened. But there comes a point where the owner community and the charter community are exposed to technology-driven initiatives. Could be in anything. Could be your banking app. Could be your telephone. Could be augmented reality coming around the corner that Apple want to replace the phone with, for example. So these things they'll see in other areas. And then when they put pressure on the industry to expect and demand a certain changes, and I believe the industry will follow, but I don't believe the industry will do it on its own. I think this Web3 community, I think in this first phase of NFTs, for example, it was too early. And they just took it for the glossy, shiny, sparkly little trinklets that it presented to them, which has now died. Now NFTs are going into a whole new phase, much deeper, more strategic. So yachting didn't need to come in just then, but they do need to come in. For example, blockchain is essential. I work a lot in data and intel. I've spent 30 years doing that, built companies up, sold them on, worked with big corporates, worked in B2B, and now I'm working on that in yachting. And it is crucial to understand it is so powerful and how it can be used and deployed through devices, through technology, through software, now through OpenAI and through models as a service called MaaS instead of SaaS. To not adopt this, companies will start to pay the price, albeit there's an argument that says if they hold down younger generations coming through with newer ideas, which is part of the fabric of the industry, I believe that they'll lose out simply to other industries that are giving more the owners in their other life what they want. And they won't recognize that, they won't see that because they only measure by their own industry, their performance.
Yachting really has to move forward, I think, and take a look at the basics before they jump to the newest technology. You actually have to take the steps to get to an understanding of what it is you're dealing with.
Well, it's how It's how they see the infrastructure, because one of the problems is some work that I do in data and intel is on the government intelligence side. And with respect, the money that they spend on it and the skill set that they have internally, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment, minimum, if not billions, if it becomes national security. And I don't think private yachts can ever spend enough money to protect against every level that they face. Because I know the security companies nowadays invest as much time, effort, and resources they can within the budgets that they're allowed. Could they do more if all of a sudden it was a big step change and clients were investing more money? Yes, but then I would imagine owners would look at it and say, surely this is overkill of the amount of money we're spending in security, trying to prevent what hasn't happened yet. It's like an insurance policy. How much do you want to pay? How much do you want to insure against? So there is that natural battle that's challenging for the security companies involved in yachting, and for what the owners feel is a worthwhile investment to sleep at night. It's a bit of a challenge. I say that because the sophistication of hacking in those areas is stepping up so much. And of course, you're dealing with owners that have such a high profile. They are targets. All of them are, for the most part. They're all targets for various reasons, on a personal basis, their business interests, their influences on government, local government, when they invest in political parties and particular political people. They're a target, and they know that. So that's a bit of a battleground. But I do look at it and go, let's put it this way. Right now, if you take a snapshot of technology, yes, Web3 could play a major part in areas such as digital twins, chain managing operational data, and so on and so forth, where you need to share with other parties that are more sensitive, and understandably so. It teases a mechanism for purchase, somewhere to stamp, whether it's a spare part coming onto the ship to allow it to be tracked like RFID and other technologies, all the way through to marketing your companies via NFTs. As I said, it's not a crime. It's a way to work, but it's not a long-term game. All the way through to AI. I mean, OpenAI, the biggest generational change has happened in the past 28 days. And I have to tell you is 30% of my workload changed within 48 hours. Can you imagine working on something for 20 years that 30% plus of my workload changed because of AI, OpenAI, because I work a lot in AI and Intel and those areas. So these things, there's got to be something wrong if you turn around and go, let me get this right. The world's industries are literally changing within hours. Yeah, within hours, because of adopting new technology coming through. And it hasn't even made the slightest dent in yachting, as in no one's asked about it, no one's interested in it, no one's looking at it, no one wants to optimize better, to simulate better, to perform better commercially, or understand operations and supply chain or enterprise resource planning. No one's even asked the question yet. So if you ask, is there a chasm and can you get left behind? Yeah, when you stop asking the questions.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with you on the OpenAI side of things. It is a game changer. And I have been investigating some of the tools that are out there myself. And wow, it just makes things so much easier.
The problem with all these things is control brings power, and power brings influence. And so there's always a political nature, even to the Web3 movement. But coming all the way back to NFTs and that whole area, the first thing to do is you should be asking the questions and talking to people like me and other people like me. I have to learn from others too. It's a nascent industry that we're all learning from. The past helps, but a lot of it is new in terms of the infrastructure, the architecture, and the technology that you're adopting. The hardest part is how people engage consumers, whether it's ultra high net worth, or middle people in terms of that. But it has a part to play in everything, including employees, like through soulbound tokens of yachts, of companies. It can be used with regards to RTs because of the fractionalization is actually manageable, whereas fractional ownership and fractional chartering never used to work. But this is actually a new mechanism that actually helps it. And there are companies now that are doing fractional ownership via NFTs now in the industry, very, very new. I know, is it George Orm, I think it is, and his company, which I saw recently in Monaco, those kind of companies. So yeah, they should be embracing it. First things first, you should be looking at it. It's like if you're thinking of getting married, you want to ask the right questions first before you do it. You don't want to just jump into it.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Andrew, I don't have to let you go, but I want to say thank you ever so much for your time. And I would like to follow up with you, say maybe 3 or 4 months to see where technology is headed within the yachting industry.
Sure.
And once again, this has been Andrew Grant-Super from Berkeley Rand. If you have any questions, everything will be supplied below this interview as far as reaching out to ask those questions. And please do, because that's the only way we learn and move forward. You've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. We'll see you again next time.